Ready? Today we're going to finish chapter 4 of the Megillah. We're going to revisit briefly some of the things that we have studied and learned about already as we move into the final closing verse of this chapter, which is going to reveal many amazing secrets about the Purim story that you probably never heard. So we're going to begin by reviewing the words that Esther spoke to Mordechai. She said, okay, I'm going to go to the king. I'm going to do everything that you asked me to do. And I realize that I have everything to lose. Esther said, you go gather all of the Jewish people together. You will not eat for 3 days and 3 nights. We too will fast. Uvachein, in the end of chapter 4, verse 16, Ovay el HaMelech, I will come to the king, Ashalei Chadas, which is not legal, not according to the law. And when I go unlawfully, V'chasher Ovadati, Avadati. As I will go, I will in all likelihood be lost and lost forever. We pointed out in our previous class already that when Esther used this redundancy, V'chasher Avadati, Avadati, and I'll be lost forever, Esther essentially was saying that regardless of the outcome, she was the loser. Because if she breaks the law, and Achashverosh is going to kill her the way he killed his first wife, which was an eminent possibility, so she lost. And if he doesn't kill her, but instead she finds favor in his eyes, and he wants to be with her, that's also a problem. Because the halacha is that if a married woman is forced into a relationship, it doesn't ruin her relationship with her husband. But if she elects to violate the bond of marriage, then she is never allowed to return to her husband. Now, Esther was married to Mordechai. And up until this point, Esther had harbored hopes that somehow she would get out of this situation and that she would return to Mordechai and live the rest of her life as the great Rebbitzin, not a queen. But at this point, when Esther has to make that decision to go willingly, then she has submitted herself to Achashverosh. She's not there under the pain of death. She's not there because she's coerced. She's there because she chose to. So, Chasher avadati avadati. Esther says, I'm in a no-win situation. I lose. Regardless of what happens, Esther loses. And on the surface, she does lose. One might argue that she wins and she lives on for eternity. And she is the savior of the Jewish people. But at tremendous personal sacrifice. Tremendous personal loss. And the Rebbe points out that Esther had absolutely no issues or problems. Everything was fine. She was living a fine life. She was living in the lap of luxury. She had her Jewish values, needs, and concerns met. It says that Esther had a different kind of servant, a woman who would come and minister every day, and these were all Jewish girls. And she named them different names of the week. And she had one girl named Friday, one girl named Shabbos. And she knew when Shabbos came, and the Shabbos girl knew what it meant to keep Shabbos. She was able to live an observant Jewish life as Esther would have wanted to. As far as she was concerned, she did not feel she was in danger. So this is a rather unreasonable thing for Mordechai to ask of Esther, but it's even more unreasonable for Esther to do. If you make the calculation, this was just a foolhardy, almost a suicidal kind of behavior. Esther's going to lose. She's going to lose, and Achashverosh is going to kill her. And Esther herself says, I have not been called to the king for 30 days already. In other words, as the Rebbe understands it, Sar China, her charisma, whatever it was that she had that impressed Achashverosh, he wasn't impressed with it anymore. He was over her. On to the next thing. He had a big harem. He was very busy. He wasn't interested in Esther anymore. And he hadn't called her for this enormous period of time. So she's going to go. She's going to risk her life. In all likelihood, she's just going to die. If one makes the logical or rational rhyme and reason calculation, this was the foolish thing to do. So what happened here? Well, what happened here is that Esther didn't make a rational, logical calculation because this was an issue of the safety of her brothers and sisters. This was the welfare. This was the life, literally, the life at stake of Am Yisrael. And the Rebbe says something amazing. The connection between us Jewish people, it is not a logical or rational connection. It's not a cerebral connection. It's not that it makes sense that we should get along. It makes sense that we have a common destiny, we have common experiences. After all, we share so many centuries of trial and travail, of tribulation and of triumph. So, it makes sense that we should kind of continue to stick together. Well, actually, it doesn't really make sense, because sometimes there are so much that divide us that we find more in common with somebody who's not necessarily Jewish, who doesn't have our shared destiny, or somebody who has abandoned that. And yet, the Torah maintains that there is an unbreakable bond between each and every member of Am Yisrael. And how does the Torah describe that relationship? The Torah uses the word ahava, which means love. And love resides in the chamber of the heart. It's not a cerebral thing, it's an emotional thing. There's a mitzvah in the Torah. V'ahavta l're'acha kamocha. We should love. It doesn't say you should be nice. It doesn't say you should be reasonable. It says you should love. And love is blind. And love is irrational. And love is unreasonable. Love doesn't have to take the shikulim, the calculations of rhyme and reason, into consideration. In fact, when people are in love, they do funny things. Things that don't make any sense. Esther was motivated not by her mind, but by her heart. And because she loved Am Yisrael, and because the love was ultimately the catalyst of her care and concern, that was what impelled her to act in this fashion. So Esther did something unreasonable. She did something which is illogical. What was the result? When she transcended herself and did something in which she could only be the loser. In the end, Esther is successful. But the Rebbe maintains her success was rooted in this notion that she did something which wasn't couched in the frame of rhyme and reason. She went beyond it. She transcended the cerebral, and she entered into a new space which was more of the spiritual and emotional. So this is the background. And when you understand this also helps us understand why Esther herself would fast. Because she was motivated by love, care, and concern, how could she not fast? How could she eat and drink and enjoy when the rest of the Jewish people would be fasting? They would be tormented. She couldn't do this. Now, Esther, of course, is going to dress in her finest clothes. So don't you think she should eat and pamper herself so she looks good? To this, the Rebbe responds on a general matrix that the Rebbe uses to explain many things in the Megillah. He says, Esther knew with absolute certainty that the situation at hand was not a logical one. It was not a natural one. There was something far beyond everyday realities going on here. This was the hand of Hashem. And the hand of Hashem because the Jewish people had violated the basic etiquette of their relationship with Hashem. So, if you write a beautiful check, you sign it with a flourish, but there's no money in the account, what will happen? The check bounces. Esther said, how can I go through the motions? She understood that all these things were just motions. This is just a check. This is just a superficial reality. If there is nothing to back it up, if we don't have Hashem's blessing, if we don't have Hashem's promise, if we don't have Hashem's salvation, none of the things I do will be successful. And Esther believed that the way for her to get that promise, the way for her to bring forth that salvation, was through fasting. So she fasted. She and the maidens who were with her. Together they fasted, together they prayed, united perhaps not physically, but spiritually with the rest of the Jewish people who were fasting. And in doing so, Esther prepares herself for the most dangerous mission of her life. Which leads us to a very interesting question. So Esther fasts, and the Jewish people fast, and, the result is extraordinary. The result is the story of Purim. So how come when we fast and pray it doesn't work? You say it does. Many will argue that oftentimes it doesn't. Or sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't seem fair, it doesn't seem right. The Ma'am always asks this question. He says, we see that many times people will fast and there'll be prayers. And he says, Lama, I'm quoting, Anurayim, Tzibur misasfim u mispalim. Why do we see at times a community get together and pray? And they're not only praying in the shul, but demois, rabbis, ishpachas, they spill many tears. Madu alei nishan? Why don't we get answered? It worked for them. Look, they got charm faster. Why doesn't it work for us today? He says something incredible. He says, Ilu hayu kulanu b'leiv echad. If we were united by heart. But this Ma'amalois is amazing because it seems this is what the Rebbe, it's the same line of thought, the same continuum the Rebbe taught about so much later, about what Esther was thinking. The Rebbe explains that the whole thing is the emotional connection. And the Ma'amalois actually explains that was the power of that fast, because they were united, b'leiv echad, in one heart. So because everybody had the same feelings in their heart, so what happened was that it was a tfilat rabbim. It was a public prayer. A public prayer means everybody prays in unison. And because everybody prayed in unison, it was a very powerful prayer. Nothing can stand in the way of a public prayer. It says, Hein kel kaber le'yimas. God never turns away. Einon moyes, our sages say. He does not disdain tfilason shel rabbim. But the Ma'amlois interprets tfilason shel rabbim not as a public, superficially, that there's a minyan who prays together, that people are under the same roof, and they seem to be praying in concert or unison. He says they have to be praying together as one. He says we have a situation where people pray as a community, but it's individuals praying in a room with many people. It's not a community praying together. He says, and so, if it's not a community that prays together, imkan ein tfilas rabbim, that's not a public prayer. A public prayer means that many hearts are woven together as one, that they express themselves in perfect concert, in perfect unison. And that, he says, is the reason that our fasts aren't working, because we have so much disunity, because we have a lack of true cohesion. And he says, when you have true cohesion and all the people coming together, he says, then a fast can be effective. The fast weakens the body. And as the body is weakened, the light of the neshama begins to reveal itself, because the fact is that the soul and the body, they're on two different wavelengths, and the body oftentimes clouds and obscures the message of the soul. It disables that message from being broadcast and sent forth clearly. It creates this confusion in the air, static. You don't get a clear signal. But when the body is weakened, in a weakened state, then the signal of the neshama comes through loud and clear. When the neshama is able to broadcast itself clearly, so then extraordinary things can happen. So this is the background. This is the background, again, a little bit repetitive, but this is what was going on here when Esther sends that message to Mordechai. And how indeed does Mordechai respond? And this is the last pasuk, the final verse of chapter 4. Let's take a look inside, and then we're going to carefully study this verse, because whilst it's just a small verse of 8 words, there's a tremendous amount of messaging that's contained in this small sentence. Vaya'avor Mordechai. It literally translates as Mordechai then left. Vayas kechol asher tzivsa alav Esther. He did everything that Esther had commanded him to do. So there's 2 basic questions about this verse, and then we're going to go into some detail. First of all, the Torah says Vaya'avor Mordechai, he left. Obviously, if he was going to do everything that Esther told him to do, he couldn't stand in one place. Why does the Torah tell us he left? What's the point? The Megillah doesn't, those words are totally superfluous. It could have said simply Vayas Mordechai. Number 1. Number 2, it says Vayas kechol asher tzivsa. He did like everything that Esther had commanded. Why didn't he simply say Vayas Mordechai asher tzivsa? She did. He did what she said. Instead it says he left. He did everything she said, as if maybe he wouldn't have done some of those things. And then there's like other little questions, because the verse could even be further dissected. But these are the 2 basic questions that have to be answered. They have to be understood. So Rashi says, Vayavor Mordechai. Mordechai left. He says Aldos. He left can also be interpreted as transgressed. He violated. It's like leaving something behind. Maybe you make a bond, a commitment, a promise, and then you leave it behind. You know, when a person violates a sin in Hebrew, it's called an avera. What does avera mean? It means to leave the relationship, to transgress the clear bond of our marital bond with Hashem, our marital connection with Hashem. So Mordechai left. What did he leave? He left dus. He left the faith behind. Left the faith behind. This is all about strengthening the faith, about keeping the faith. So Rashi says, "Lihis'ana is b'yom tov," to fast on a Yom Tov. We should Rishon Shal Pesach, the first day of Pesach. And Rashi adds the words, "Shehis'ana b'yudalad b'Nisan," the fast of the 14th day of Nisan. V'tezvav, the 15th day of Nisan. V'tetzayin, the 16th day of Nisan. Why? Sha'arei b'yom yud gimel nichtevu asvarim. On the 13th day of Nisan, the edict was inked, and then it was sent everywhere. And Mordechai immediately knows, right? Remember we learned about that? He immediately finds out, is immediately aware of everything, immediately responds, immediately comes to Esther. He says, now. She says, now? Now. That's fine. Fast 3 days. Well, if 3 days are now and nothing could be delayed, Mordechai said earlier, we can't delay this. We can't deal with this at some later moment. This has to be dealt with immediately. So Esther said, fine, fast 3 days. Well, fast 3 days means today, or tomorrow really, which is Yudalah, the 14th day of Nisan, because he came on the 13th day, immediately when it happened. The 14th day of Nisan, Erev Pesach, the first day of Pesach, and the second day of Pesach. Now it's interesting that Rashi says, Lihis'anas b'Yom Tov. He says to fast on Yom Tov. That's what he says. Doesn't get into any details, and we'll revisit this a little bit later on. Now, where is Rashi taking his interpretation from? We have a Medrash Rabbah, and we have a Gemara in Megillah on Daf Tezvav, on page 15. The Medrash Rabbah says, Shaloshas Yomim, 3 days, Elohein, these are the 3 days. Yud Gimel Yudal Tezvav, the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th. And the Megillah, the Medrash Rabbah says, but how could that be? After all, the first day of Pesach is included. So it seems almost like Mordechai said, that's not going to work. Let's wait till after Yom Tov. And the Medrash says, Shalchaloi, she sent a message to him. Zakin Shabi Yisrael, she said, sage of Israel. Lama hu Pesach. What do we need Pesach for? If we have no Jewish people, what do you need Pesach? It's like Pesach without Jews? How's that going to work? Miyad Shama Mordechai, v'hoidel dvoreha. Mordechai heard, and he acknowledged that she was right. So that's the Medrash Rabbah. The Medrash Rabbah actually identifies 13, 14, and 15. Rashi does not seem to follow that approach. Rather, Rashi says that we talk here about 14, 15, and 16, because logically speaking, if it was written on the 13th day, this was the 13th day. And to start fasting in the middle of nowhere, you have to get the word out first. Get the word out would mean they would fast the next 3 days. So Rashi says 14, 15, and 16. The Gemara in Daf Tezvav, the Gemara in Megillah asks a question. And the question is, Mahu Vayaver. What is this Vayaver? He left. What does it mean? The Gemara answers, Rav Omar, Rav taught, he was the senior sage of Bavel, together with Shmuel, the 2 senior Torah teachers of Bavel, which is the main citadel of Torah learning at the time. Rav says, Hever Yom Rishon Shal Pesach B'Tainis. They passed the first day of Pesach fasting. Shmuel says, Ovar Arkuma de Maya. He passed through a canal of water, which we'll soon see what that means. But that's Rav and Shmuel, that's Vayaver. He left, he passed through, he went through. Vayaver, the Gemara clearly understands as going through, or violating, passing over. So he went through, either he went through the law, like he transgressed the law, they fast on the first day of Pesach, or according to Shmuel, he went through a river, a canal, which we'll soon explain. So what does this mean when we say that they fasted on the first day of Pesach? Well, according to most opinions, it means very clearly that there was no mitzvahs of Pesach done. In the Vilna Gaon says clearly, he says, what does it mean, Yosef B'Tainis? And he says, V'loi ochal matzah u'marer. They did not eat matzah and marer. In other words, there was no Seder. A Sederless Pesach in Shushan. If they had a Seder, it wasn't with matzah and marer. Maybe they read the words. Perhaps they told a story, but they did not eat. And part of Pesach is eating. You have to eat. So the Vilna Gaon clearly interprets this as being a situation where they did not eat for those 3 days. Now, about the fast of 3 days, I touched upon this, but I want to just reiterate. There is a dispute amongst the Rishonim, what exactly this means. The question is asked that some people could fast for 3 days, but many people can't. Is this not a gzeira she'ein hatzibur yecholin lamed ba? Is this not a decree that was asking too much of the people? It's too difficult. Some people would be in danger. And the answer is, even though usually we do not make a gzeira, we do not make a decree she'ein ha'roiv hatzibur yecholin lamed, that most people cannot easily do. It's really difficult, but this was a very difficult situation. And because this was a trying situation, they call for trying measures. Extraordinary situation, extraordinary measures. There's no choice here. So that's one opinion, is that they actually fasted for 3 days. Now the Ibn Ezra maintains it was 2 days. He said on the 3rd day they already eat. It was until the 3rd day. So Ibn Ezra interprets the words, when she says, Al teichlav al tishtul shleishas yamim, it means don't eat and drink until the 3rd day from now, which maybe would follow the Medrash that says it was the 13th, 14th, and 15th. On the 16th, they ate already. That was the 3rd day. It was don't eat for the rest of today, stop eating immediately, and begin praying immediately. There are those who maintain that it says, Al tishtu shleishas yomim laila v'yoyim. Don't eat and drink for 3 days, day and night. Laila v'yoyim, day and night. So they say day and night means that which is certainly day or night, but there is a period every evening and every morning which is neither day nor night. And in the evening, it's very famous. It's called Bein Hashmashas. Bein Hashmashas means the time of twilight. The sun sets, the day is over. But even though the sun has set and the day has ended, night has not yet fallen. Is it still bright outside? You just can't see the sun. The sun has already gone over the horizon. So they want to suggest that the people grabbed a morsel of food, ben hashmashas. Now, even if we are to take that approach, that they did not actually fast for 3 days consecutively, but if we're to take the approach that they fasted on 3 days and in 3 nights, and they only ate between days and nights, only when it was neither, kind of that twilight zone, you would still jibe with the notion that they didn't do the mitzvahs, like the Gra says, because you're not allowed to eat matzah and murr at Ben Hashmashas. It has to be ba'erev, it has to be at night. So even if we take that approach, that they didn't actually fast for 3 days, we still would have this notion that they in fact did not perform the mitzvahs. So the mitzvahs was superseded. Mordechai transgressed the mitzvahs. Esther made this request. She said, if you want me to go and do what's illogical, you want me to go beyond the rhyme and reason of my own, the law that I have to live within, then you all go beyond the law that we all have to live within. No Seder. No Pesach. Suspended this year. Now, of course, this is going to be very unpleasant for everybody. Because even assimilated Jews, Pesach, got to have a Seder. Everybody comes home for the Seder. So the fact there was no Seder, it's a major shakeup. Like, no Seder? No matzah? I mean, I'm sure they had matzah prepared. It's the Erev Pesach. Sure, everybody's home was clean for Pesach. People, the invitations are out, who's coming for the Seder? And all of a sudden, the Rebbe of the Jewish people, the Moshe Rabbeinu of the day says, stop. Forget the guests, forget the matzah, forget the wine. There's no Seder. Everybody come to shul. Our lives are in danger. The future of the Jewish people is at stake. So this was something extraordinary. This really shook everybody to the core. It made everybody realize how serious this was. That explains that the words Vayaver Mordechai. Mordechai transgressed. Mordechai transgressed means he went, so to speak, superseding the laws of the Torah. The Ma'am Lois wants to say something very interesting. He says that Vayaver Mordechai, Mordechai transgressed his own approach. Mordechai himself said, no, that's unreasonable. And that's kind of what the Medrash alludes to. And Esther said, not any more unreasonable when you're asking of me. So if you're asking of me to do something that unreasonable, then I'm asking you back to do something unreasonable. If this is indeed such a danger, there's such an extraordinary time, that all rhyme and reason is cast aside, then all rhyme and reason is indeed cast aside. And Mordechai rethought, and he said, she's right. She's right. If it's urgent as I say it is, then we have to put full stop on everything, and full stop happens. So this is the idea of Ovar, Mordechai, Vayavar Mordechai, that Mordechai, so to speak, violates the festival of Pesach, the fasting on Pesach. And Vayavar Mordechai means that Mordechai also transcends his own svara, his own approach. The Maimon says something very interesting. He said it's like Mordechai thought, if Esther will have Mesiras Nefesh, if Esther will show that she's ready to risk her life and she loses everything, and as we said, she's the loser in the end, regardless she's the loser. So if Esther's ready to lose everything, that will be a schus, that will be enough of a merit. And Esther's response back is nothing doing. It cannot be riding on my shoulders. We need to do this together. It can't be I have Mesiras Nefesh. We all have to have Mesiras Nefesh. We all have to be in this together. Which this dovetails very nicely into the words of the Mamlois who said there was something done in unison. It was a public prayer. Only when it's a public prayer, only when everybody's on the same page, everybody's in the same feeling in their heart, everybody's impelled with the same form of inspiration, then and only then can you actually have something that will bring about an incredible miracle, as it did. As the story is told. So this is the Vayava Mordechai. Mordechai violates what he's ready to do. And that means that they didn't eat. They didn't eat. So why doesn't it say that? Why doesn't it say that? The Medrash doesn't actually say, and Rashi doesn't even say they didn't eat. It's true. The Gra says it. But Rashi doesn't say that. Rashi says, Vayava Mordechai al dos lehisanos. He violated the law to fast. Rashi never says no matzah and mar. The Medrash doesn't say no matzah and mar. The words of the Medrash are Lamahu Pesach. It says V'halo yemechet shel Pesach is day one of Pesach. Lamahu Pesach. What do I need Pesach for? Or Lamahu Pesach. And when the Gemara says Vayav Mordechai, it says Shehever Yom Rishon Shem Pesach B'Tainus. Now you could infer that obviously if they're fasting, they're not eating matzah and mar. But why doesn't it say that openly? Now some opinions say, well, that's what it is. So we talked about that. That's exactly what the Vilna Gaon says. And the Mamlois himself quotes a number of other achronim who say that even though that in these days is going to be a mitzvah saseh, a positive mitzvah in the Torah to eat matzah, and a rabbinic mitzvah of drinking 4 cups of wine. And it's, of course, a rabbinic mitzvah to eat maror when we don't have a korban Pesach. And it's prohibited to fast on this day. All of these, it was better to be mevatel, all these mitzvahs, in order to save the Jewish people. And the Mamloyes, who quotes a variety of achronim, he says, bitel mitzvahs hachag. They violated the mitzvahs of the festival, matzah, maror, and arba kaisis. And that's the meaning of Yask Chalash Tzivtzal of Esther. The Esther did all these things. However, it is interesting to note that in the writings of our sages, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say in the Gemara or Medrash they didn't eat matzah maror. It doesn't mention matzah maror. The Achronim, the later scholars, infer this. So actually, there are some who maintain that they did do the mitzvahs even though they fasted. And this gets very nuanced. You see, usually, when we talk about eating from a Torah perspective, it has to be defined. Is nibbling eating, for example? If you nibble, did you eat? Some people say, I'm just going to nibble something. I'm eating something. People can speak euphemistically. But when we speak in legal terms, and Judaism is first and foremost a document of action, we have to do, there has to be some kind of legal definition. So when you have a statement in the Torah that says, you may not eat, it has to be defined. At what point is it called eating? If I lick it but don't actually swallow anything, is that eating? If I smell the non-kosher meat, is that called eating? What does it mean ingestion? How much is called eating? How much eating is called eating? So the answer is there's a shear, there's an amount. And the amount is called a kizayat, which literally translates as an olive. It's like an ounce. Like an ounce. So that's called a serving. It's called a serving. We use this today. When every package today has to have some kind of nutritional information. Very few people read it, but it still has to be over there. And how do you say per serving? What's a serving? So interestingly, servings usually an ounce. It says so many calories per serving. It's usually an ounce. But there has to be some kind of system. Otherwise, what? You're going to put on a box of something. This has 65,000 calories. It probably does have 65,000 calories. But it would take like a weightlifter to eat the whole box. Nobody eats the box at once. Would it be reasonable to put on a box of Cheerios how many calories it has? How many, all the Cheerios in the thing? How is somebody supposed to figure out that? How much is a bowl? I'd have to figure out how many bowls are in there. So we say a serving. However much that is. It's an ounce maybe. And there's a serving. So this many calories to that many serving. It's just a legal terminology. You have to define. Judaism has, first and foremost, the responsibility to define everything in legal terms. So when we talk about eating, the Torah prohibits eating, there has to be a clear definition. What is it? How much, first and foremost? The answer is kizayit. And this is true with regard to all of the things which we must eat and the things which we may not eat. So, for example, something we must eat matzah. We must eat maror. We must eat a part of the Pesach offering when the Beis HaMikdash is there. Or other korbanot that have to be eaten. There are things we have to eat. There is a mitzvah for us to recite Birchat HaMazon. When do we recite Birchat HaMazon? Biblically, when we have satiation. That's a personal thing. However, rabbinically, after you've eaten, how much is eaten? I have to eat a kizayit. So the amount of eating, when you have to eat something, when you're supposed to eat something, the amount is kizayit. It's a halachic term. It's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. This is an oral tradition passed down from Moses at Sinai, that when Torah says eat, it means kizayit. And when the Torah says don't eat, when would you fully violate the Torah's prohibition? When you eat a kizayit. If you don't eat a kizayit, it's not nice, it's inappropriate. It's called Chatzi Shir. We have a famous machlekes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. Most Rishonim rule like Rabbi Yochanan and say that Chatzi Shir is aser min HaTorah. You're not allowed to eat even a small little bit of pork. But you didn't fully violate until you ate an ounce. This is true with regards to all the times the Torah talks about eating. With one exception. And that exception is fasting. When is the Torah talk to us about fasting? On Yom Kippur. And how does the Torah talk to us about fasting? What terminology does the Torah use? Does it say don't eat? No. It says v'initem. V'initem es nafshosechem. The word v'initem is a verb. It comes from the noun of inui. Inui means pain or afflict. We're supposed to afflict our souls. We're supposed to feel the hunger. So that's the meaning of fasting. The meaning of fasting is not eating. The meaning of fasting is necessarily afflicting one's soul or afflicting oneself by denying basic human needs. Now, there are many basic human needs. Going to the washroom is a basic human need. The halacha says it's prohibited to restrain oneself, chas v'shalom. So there's no such halacha that says we have to at any point restrain ourselves. If the body has to get some weight, get rid of waste matter. That's not an issue. That's not called inui. That's not called affliction. That's not called denying our basic human need. Nowhere in the Torah is there a prohibition of sleeping. The Torah says don't sleep. Stay up for 24 hours. No such prohibition. The Torah says get a good night's sleep. What does the Torah say? The Torah says we shouldn't eat or drink. Not eating and drinking is a basic human need. And that's the Torah's idea of how once a year we should release ourselves from the bonds of physicality that shackle us and that darken and obscure the soul messages. As we talked about earlier, when the body is weakened, then the soul's broadcast comes through more clearly. So v'inisa means the body should be in a weakened state. And that weakened state is when we didn't eat. Don't eat, we feel weakened. So how much do you have to eat to undo the v'initim? So there's a different amount. It's not a kizayit. It's called a kosevet. Koseves hagasa is the terminology that's used. It's a larger amount. Koseves hagasa is almost 1 ounce and 3/4, almost 2 ounces. Which means that if a person were to eat only 1 ounce of food, would he or she have technically violated Yom Kippur? No. You're still called fasting. You shouldn't do this unless you have to. Now, I shouldn't give you this information, huh? Well, here's where this information comes in handy. If somebody is in a weakened physical state, where a medical professional says, if you fast, you will put your life in danger. For example, if somebody has diabetes, and if they have an insulin low, it literally could put them into toxic shock or put them in a coma. It could be fatal. What do you do then? You have to eat. You violate the Torah to preserve life. However, violating the Torah to preserve life doesn't mean that you just abrogate everything. We still try to keep whatever we can keep. So if there's a way to do it, which does not fully violate Yom Kippur, obviously that would be the preferred path. So if a medical professional says, you need to make sure you have food in your body on Yom Kippur, what will your rabbi say? Die. No. What will he say? He will say you should eat pachas mikashir, less than the amount. You eat small amounts. And then you wait what's called b'chtei achilas pras, which is a certain amount of time. The amount of time of eating a serving. Literally, to eat half a loaf. So, and there's different opinions as how much that is. Let's, for argument's sake, we're going to go with 9 minutes now. Some shiurim is even as much as 12 minutes. We'll go with 9 minutes. It's like a modicum, like a reasonable way of quantifying that amount of time. So what I tell people like that, I tell people before Yom Tov, you pack little shot glasses that are 1 ounce. Pack it with egg salad or tuna, a protein. I think it was very rich in protein. And fill up little cups of Gatorade or orange juice, just less than 1 ounce. And you take a little drink. And then you wait 9 minutes. You want to be machmir, wait 12 minutes. 13 minutes if you want. And then again, you repeat the process. Eat this little bit of food, drink that little bit of drink, and then repeat the process. It's not a satisfying way to get through the day. It doesn't actually feel satisfying. It doesn't still your hunger. When you eat so little, you still feel hungry. Just like when you nibble, you still feel hungry. What stills hunger? The amount of a kersevis, which is just under 2 ounces, 1.9 ounces. And what happens is when you eat 1.9 ounces, even if you're a giant, it stills hunger. Maybe for a moment, but it actually stills the hunger for a moment. And once you would still the hunger, you ruin v'yinitim. So therefore, there's some who reason they fasted for 3 days. Halachically, they violated Yom Tov by fasting. You're not allowed to fast on Yom Tov. But they still ate matzah. How so? They ate 1 ounce of matzah, not a kosevet. They drank cups of wine. Doesn't say they did that. Matzah they ate, it says. Mur they ate. Matzah and mur they ate. Because matzah and mur, you have to have the idea of inui. So this is one opinion. But clearly you saw there's other achronim who say no. It says don't eat. It means not eating. The Vilna Gaon says clearly his words are achal matzah umar. They didn't eat matzah umar. Okay, there's different opinions. For sure this was a very bold move. There was a famous Rebbe in Poland called the Radomski Rebbe. He wrote a book called Tiferet Shloimeh. It's an extraordinary inspired tzaddik. And he said, you know why this miracle happened, he said? When God came, it was the night of Pesach, and he came to look for his matzah and mur. Hashem has nachas when we do mitzvahs. No matzah, no mur, no wine, nothing. What's everybody doing? They're crying instead. He said, that made a real shake-up in the heavens. That really shook the foundations of everything. And that brought about the miracle of Balayla Hu Nadada, where the king, so to speak, his sleep is stirred. And we'll get to that later on in Mirz Hashem. And you'll see that the king's sleep being stirred is also a code message for Almighty God being stirred. When did that happen? That happened in the middle of the fasting. Right in the middle of this fast. Because these next 3 days are when most of the Purim story unfolds. From the 13th day to the 16th day of Nisan. On the 13th day, the letters were sent. On the 16th day of Nisan, Haman and his sons were swinging from the gallows. Then there was a whole year that followed, or a whole 11 months till Purim. But this was the whole story now. The crux of the Purim story unfolds in 3 days. 3 very feverish days. Packed days, busy days, holy days, days of national spiritual rehabilitation. of a Jewish renewal, the likes of which had never been seen before. And that wave of tshuva brought about a transformation. So now we understand the word vayaver. Now it's starting to make a lot of sense to us. Now we know it means that he violated, that he went, so to speak, he went over. And there are those who maintain that what does it mean in the Gemara that says that he went over? That he went over. So the opinion of Shmuel in the Gemara is that went over, he says, Arkuma de Maya. What's Urkuma de Maya? So Urkuma de Maya means that there was a canal that divided the royal compound of Shushan from the city of Shushan. I'm not sure if this is correct, but I think from my memory of a child being in Washington, D.C., that there's the area of the Capitol, called Capitol Hill, in the White House. There's the governmental area. I'm pretty sure there's a canal, or the Potomac River. There's some kind of river. And that there's like bridges across it, but there's the governmental area where all the government buildings are. I think the Smithsonian is there, all these like famous national entities. And you have the Washington Memorial, the Lincoln Memorial. That's all in this one area. And then there's residential areas of Washington, D.C. It's still Washington, D.C. It's still District of Columbia. It's not part of Maryland, but there's like a river in between. Now, I may be wrong about this. This is just drawing on my memory, and I did have a chance to Google it before the class. But if I'm right, it's interesting, because that's how Shushan was. Shushan actually there was the Shushan royal compound, which had the palace and the queen's palace and the harems and probably the equivalents of a parliament and government buildings and something. We had a prime minister. Haman was a prime minister, so there was a parliament. There's all of that. And then there was the residential area of Shushan, which is an enormous town. It's probably the biggest city and most famous city in Persia at the time. So Mordechai went across that canal, which is you're not allowed to take a boat on Shabbos or Yom Tov. But he was ferrying. There was no bridge. It was a ferry. He was using the ferry to get back and forth. Mordechai was traveling. He was using the subway on Shabbos. Why? You have to communicate to all Jewish people. Because Mordechai himself rolled his sleeves up, and it was Mordechai himself who went. As the Ma'am Loyas, quoting the Or Chodesh, says, Torach atzmoi. He did not send messengers. Mordechai went himself, kedei lachanes es kol haYehudim, in order to gather all of the Jewish people in Shushan, as per the mitzvah, the instruction of Esther. So now go back to the pasuk. Vayaver Mordechai. Mordechai went. He crossed the river. He violated the law. He said she should do something which is a violation of the law. He too violated the law. Esther. She did everything Esther said. Everything, first and foremost, we already learned, means fasting on Pesach. But what's the kechol asher tzivsa? Kechol asher tzivsa is that she said, gather all the Jewish people together. But some of the Jewish people were so far lost. Mordechai said, that's not going to be reasonable. That everyone said. Mordechai probably said to her, let's get them to eat kosher food. You want them to fast? Let them make a bracha at least. I'll be happy if they'll eat something, they'll stop eating pork for a day. That's what Mordechai said. But Esther said, no. You're going to gather all of the Jewish people together. And only when we have all of the Jewish people together, that's when we're going to be able to see a real transformation. And that's really interesting, because if we go back to the Ma'am Lois, when the Ma'am Lois talks about this idea of the fast, the Ma'am Lois emphasizes that the power of the fast was because everybody was involved. And here he invokes a famous maxim. The Ma'am Lois invokes the idea, which is the Gemara talks about, that kol tainus she'ein bo mipeishi Yisrael, any tainus, any fast that doesn't have amongst them sinners of Israel participating, ain't a tainus. And we talked about this in our previous class, the idea of chelbana, the galbanum, which in and of itself is a foul-smelling spice. It's not a beautiful ingredient. However, when mixed with the others, it sharpens all of the other ingredients. And so when you see a yid, a lost yid, a yid who is agnostic, could care less, ate on the vessels of the Beis HaMikdash, non-kosher food on Shabbos, while Achashverosh was prancing about in the clothing of the Kohen Gadol, making a mockery of everything that was Jewish and holy. And these Jews ate there. And then that yid turns around and fasts. That sharpens everybody else's prayers. That makes the power of the prayer that much more pungent and that much more effective. And this then is the idea That's the idea. Kechol asher tzivsa. The Rebbe says, what's the kechol? Everything. Mordechai, he gave in to her. Like the Mamloya says, Avral svaras atzmai. He said, I'm going to leave my approach behind. Your approach is right. And we see a fascinating interplay between Mordechai and Esther. The Ma'am Loya says, quoting the Shalom Esther, he says, Esther, listen to Mordechai. When he said to her that you will not tell everybody, Meiladata, you won't tell everybody your birthplace. It says, Lahigida Esther. Esther did not tell. Not her birthplace, not her background, not her ethnicity, not her religion. Mum is the word. She didn't say anything. And it was probably a very difficult thing for her to keep the secret. She was, her husband wanted to know, who are you? She followed Mordechai. And Mordechai appreciated that. And he followed Esther. She listened to him. In the end, it was he who listened to her. And this is the interplay of Mordechai and Esther. Mordechai came and made demands, extraordinary demands. Esther made demands back. And together, as they demanded from each other, they brought out the finest from within themselves, and ultimately through that, from Klal Yisrael. And so Targum Sheni says what ensued was absolutely unbelievable. Targum Sheni says that when this message came forth, everything turned inside out for the Jewish people. He said the Chatan left his chuppah, and he tore off his finery. The Kala left her chuppah, and she, instead of wearing a crown, she wore ashes. The Targum Sheni says even the animals, the pets didn't eat. Even the animals that belonged to the Jewish people, the behemoth, the shor, the tzon, the oxen, the sheep, nobody ate. Even the babies didn't nurse. He says there was young Kohanim, 12,000 young Kohanim. They set forth at Mordechai's instructions. They fanned across the entirety of the Shushan, the greater Shushan area. They held a shofar in their right hand, and they held a Sefer Torah in their left hand. And they began to weep and cry wherever they went. And they said, this is the Torah that you have given us. This is the Torah, they said. And this is the nation that you love. And if they're no longer, who will keep this Torah? Who will read this Torah? They said, the sun and the moon can stop shining because it's all about B'shvil HaTorah, B'shvil Yisrael. But if there's no Yisrael, nothing's left. And in this way, they inspired the entirety of the nation. Not their words, but their actions. The way they behaved moved everybody. They fell on their faces. They said, Aneinu Avinu Aneinu, Aneinu Malkeinu Aneinu. Answer us our Father, answer us our King. This is really an interesting medrash because we have a prayer, Avinu Malkeinu. And according to most opinions, the Avinu Malkeinu prayer was actually composed by Rabbi Akiva during a very, very difficult drought in the land of Israel. The Gemara in Taina says Rabbi Akiva flung open the parochas, the curtain to the ark, and he thrust his head inside, and he cried out, Avinu Malkeinu, Ein lanu melech ela ata. Our Father, our King, we have no king but you. And that was a very potent prayer. Obviously because Rabbi Akiva uttered it, but it made a difference. And many have explained the value and virtue of this prayer, that we call upon the duality within our relationship with God. That on one hand we say God is like our Father, it's Avinu, it's like a parent. And on the other hand we say God is like our King. On one hand our relationship is characterized and punctuated with the idea of love, of a loving relationship, Ahavas Hashem. On the other hand is Yiras Shamayim, a sense of awe, a sense of reverence, like one would behave with respect towards a monarch. And I always thought that the origin of this prayer is the story of Rabbi Akiva, but if you look in this medrash, it says they said this already long before Rabbi Akiva. This was the prayer in the time of Purim. That's how they prayed. And then they began to blow shofar blasts. And all of this awoke the entirety of the Jewish people. And I want to zero in on the last 4 words of the Targum Sheni. He says, V'nadu avasana min kivreihan. This woke up our ancestors from their repose. Literally, it stirred their graves. In other words, this was not prayers going on just here. At this point, the prayers began in earnest on high. So the famous question is always asked about, do you have to go to the grave of a tzaddik? And usually the answer is yes. The answer is yes. But the truth is, it's not only sometimes in location, sometimes there's also, just like there's location is a specific location, there's also something called a specific moment in time. There could be a time that's so powerful that this too is able to stir the ancestors. And that's what happened. That's what happened, my friends. It says, this fast did not only tear up the Jewish people right here on earth, it tore the heavens open. It tore open Gan Eden. In the Ma'am Loyas is a fascinating details of Mordechai's prayer. It's a whole page of what Mordechai prayed. And one of the things Mordechai justifies the fact that he did not bow to Haman. He said, it was never about my own honor. It was never about my own dignity. He said, I would be happy to bow. The Medrash says, I would have licked the straps of his boots if this is about me. It was all about Hashem, he says. It was all about, because I didn't want to violate the name, your name. That's why I didn't bow. And he begs Hashem that Hashem should save the people. And he also invokes the maxim that's found in the Tillim, Lama Yemru Hagoyim, Ayeh Elohim. Why should the world, the Gentiles, say, where is their God? Where is their God? Very, very poignant, very powerful and moving prayer of Mordechai. And then the Ma'am Loyas also brings down the Seder Tefillah of Esther. And amongst the things Esther says, I'm in the palace. I'm a prisoner in a palace. She says, I'm here in a lap of luxury, but I can't go anywhere. Gives you an insight into her, how she says, I'm a prisoner. I'm a prisoner. And she says, I'm an orphan. I have no father, I have no mother. But you, God, are the father, the parent of orphans. So these are some of the things that Esther touches upon in her prayer as she pours forth before HaKadosh Baruch Hu in supplication. So this is what happened. This is what was engendered as a result of Esther's prayer. And according to the Rivash, Rabbi Yosef Bechor Shor says, a message went out far beyond Shushan. Far, far beyond Shushan. Jewish people living everywhere, even in distant vicinities, somehow heard, and they too joined in to these prayers. And they too began to pour forth in supplication before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Medrash tells us that Mordechai himself gathered 22,000 Jewish children. The great Rebbe himself, with the little Yiddish Kinderlach. 22,000 children. And he prayed with them. And he taught them Torah. And what did he teach about? On the night of the Seder, he taught about the Omer carbon, which is supposed to be brought the next day. Even though you can't bring a carbon Omer. One could argue that that Torah study is not relevant. It wasn't going to be practical. And yet Mordechai prayed, and he spoke of the Omer. And when you learn the Torah, it's like you bring the carbon, because you're doing the best that you could. So he said, this is the carbon of the day. We're going to learn about it. It's interesting that on some of the Bar Kochva coins they found an Omer cup. Nobody knows why they use that as one of the images. There's a lulav, there's an esrog, never a menorah, interestingly, on the coins. Never a menorah. So a lulav and an esrog makes actually sense, because the lulav in the Medrash is like a sword, represents victory. The Medrash says, Anan Natschinan. There's a facade of the Beis HaMikdash on some of the coins. And some of the coins have an Omer cup. This is just my personal theory. I don't know if this is true. But somehow, it seems to me that the Omer, the legend of the Omer cup, the story was something that continued to, in a sense, ignite Jewish imagination. From that night of Mordechai, learning with the Jewish children, learning about the Omer, the hope of the Jewish people. That when we yearn for the Beis HaMikdash, the Omer was as if the cup that held our dreams. I don't know if it's just my own chalavis. I don't. Maybe not. But at any rate, the Mordechai says that's what happened. And Haman found out about all this. And Haman was a great believer in Jewish spirituality. He hated us with a passion and wanted to kill us. But he was also very afraid that we could bring God to our aid. As long as we sinned, he knew we were finished. But the moment he saw us observing the Torah again, he knew that this could be a problem. And Haman himself came to this convocation. And he confronted Mordechai. And he told the children, go away from him. He's a bad man. Don't listen to him. Go home and eat. And the children declared, we will stay with Mordechai no matter what you do to us. Haman threatened the little children. So we see here the beautiful Mesiras Nefesh of the children. And when it was the children who Mordechai surrounded himself with, when he brought forth these prayers that stormed the heavens. And all of this together now gives us a little bit of a picture, gives a little bit of understanding of how Mordechai going to Esther, Esther then turning back to Mordechai, together, between the two of them, this amazing groundswell of Jewish rejuvenation, this wave of tshuva sweeps across their nation, and there's going to be a total transformation in the end. This is how chapter 4 ends. We don't hear more about the fasting. We don't hear more about what Jewish people are doing to ensure all of these miracles. But what we will hear going forward is what Esther then does, beginning on the third day. And we'll see the machinations that are put in place by Esther and how this culminates with the miracle of Purim. So we're not going to be leaving these few days. We have arrived at these dates on the calendar. We're going to stay on these dates of the calendar for the next few chapters. And then later, after the miracle unfolds in those first days of Pesach, then we go back to the days that followed, the months that followed, the year that led up to the actual victory of Purim. And that, my dear friends, is the story of Sederless and Shushan. This is a peek behind the Purim curtain, parting the Purim curtains. And this is I think the untold story of how Am Yisrael was able to bring about the great miracle and the great salvation, the Nisim v'Neflois that we saw for our ancestors in those days, the Nisim v'Neflois that we hope and pray for in our time with the coming of Mashiach, B'mheira, will be Amenu, Amen.